Well, hello there. It's Graham Healy, the voice, back online. I haven't been online for a while as I've been very, very busy doing a lot of stuff. Okay, first of all, just a happy Christmas, or Merry Christmas rather. Happy New Year, and remember, Jesus is the reason for the season. And, wow, is stuff happening? Well, let's just have a bit of a look at it now. First of all, what's happening in Australia and globally, man, there's a shake-up happening globally. I mean, we've been prophesying this for some time, but it's sort of come as a bit of a shock to me, in a way, when you actually see it happening. For instance, the whole of Europe is in turmoil, especially France. That so-called president of France, fair dinkum, get rid of him now. Also the Chancellor of Germany. I mean, they've wrecked those countries. And just recently, I see that about 7 retired generals in the UK are endorsing Donald Trump. They've done a full-page ad in the UK press, and basically saying that they're endorsing the policies of Donald Trump, and for the UK to wake up to themselves. And I'll endorse that as well. Apart from that, Australia's got to wake up to itself as well. I'm going to cover a couple of subjects, nothing too complicated. Well, yeah, for what era we're in, haha. Number one is radical Islam. Now, I don't call it radical Islam, I call it fundamental Islam, right? And what the difference is, fundamental Islam is basically adhering to what the Quran says. Now, you can research it yourself. Bottom line is that the Quran, in about 150 different statements right through that book, basically says death to infidels, Christians and Jews. So that's what it says. Now, when you see all this propaganda out there, you think, oh, well, there's moderate Muslims and there's moderate this and moderate that. Well, there are Muslims who do not take the Quran literally, but you'd have about 5% that they do, and they're your terrorists and all these sort of characters, right? And unfortunately in Australia, we have that issue as well. Now, as from a Christian perspective, we've got to love all people, and we love the Muslims as well, but at the end of the day, you love people with a relative caution, because if their manual that they're reading, quote, the Quran says death to infidels, Jews and Christians, well, you've got to sort of question yourself a little bit whether or not that is an actual clash with the Judeo-Christian Western society. When I say the Judeo-Christian Western society, Australia has been founded on that principle, and all our laws in our country are based on the 10 Commandments. So, just you can argue that as much as you like. The Constitution of Australia, the legal system, is originally based on the 10 Commandments. So, it's like treating your neighbour as you want to be. It's the golden rule. It says, love your neighbour as you would yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Bottom line is, the legal system is based in the West on that. Now, what you've got to understand is in the Middle East, it's not based on that. It's based on the Quran, which basically is Sharia law. And Sharia law, is not complicated. Basically, it's it's a law that says, in summary, death to infidels, Christians and Jews, and people cross that law, they get their heads chopped off, their arms chopped off. So, it's pretty barbaric, actually, at the end of the day. So the danger is not the people, it's the Islam itself. And the danger is the small 5% that would be, some people term it as radicalised. It's not, they're fundamentalist. They literally take the Quran and act it out. So that's why you've got the terrorism in Australia. You've got all our politicians jumping around and trying to, let's say, avoid the issues. And the reality is that they've got to face them. And 2019 is going to be a pivotal year for that. Donald Trump's doing a good job in the US, and it looks like the whole of Europe, the yellow vests and all this, are crying out, we want Donald Trump. Well, we need the Donald Trump principles in Australia too. ScoMo's off to a good start by recognising Jerusalem, etc. But okay, we'll just leave that little subject there. Now, let's just talk about the economy. All right. Australia is on the verge of giving its sovereignty away to globalisation. Now, all these riots over in France, Europe, starting in London now actually, it's all about the rise up against globalisation. What is globalisation? It's pretty simple really. It's the whole UN agenda. So in other words, as I've said I'll tell you this in a second, I've got a website coming up shortly. As I've been stating in my various websites for the last 30 years, Australia's been slowly eroded away, and now it's sort of reached a peak, well, the whole world's reached a peak regarding the veil is off for globalisation. So what does globalisation do? Bottom line, it puts a remote control government via the UN overseas to control all other parts of the world in a great big negative downside. And it de-sovereigntises every country. So it takes your individuality away as a person, and also takes the individual sovereign right away as a country. Now, what does that do? I've explained it very clearly in my websites, but I have one coming up that I'll tell you about in a second. What it basically does, globalisation just turns you into a debt slave. So Australia, 7 trillion in debt, total debt. Go and have a look on australiadebtclock.com, and you'll see that we're in personal debt, business debt, you add up all the debt, we're 7 trillion in debt. So you and I are debt slaves in this country at the moment. And that's not to mention what's going on with what I call fundamental Islam, halal, everything and all this. All these little tricks of the trade that the Muslims are using to fund their own ideology, very dangerous. It will undermine Western society. It is doing it all around the world, and it's got to stop now. So just in finishing this broadcast, we're heading into a critical election in 2019, predicted to be probably May, and I've been asked by Rise Up Australia Party to represent them as a lead senator for Queensland. So it's a bit of news out of the bag. I've also got a website which I'll be launching very, very shortly that'll explain our policies. At the moment, you can go straight onto the Rise Up Australia website, the main one, but I've done a separate one to sort of give you some idea where I'm coming from, which covers the economy. It covers Sharia law. It covers my background, business background, and et cetera, et cetera. So next year, folks, we'll be running meetings very, very quickly in the year. Probably February, I'll run the first meeting here in Queensland, and it'll be in the Pig and Whistle at Indooroopilly Shopping Centre. So I'll let everyone know that's interested. And bottom line is, next year, the independents, such as Rise Up Australia Party, we've got to take control of the Senate. Now, I know Bob Catter and all the various other independents. I grew up in North Queensland. So I'm sort of very pro the, what would you call, the conservative right, Christian right. And Rise Up Australia Party is led by Daniel Nyala, who has already established quite some, made some great headway in regarding religious freedom in Australia and political freedom. So also some other good news will be that I've already had discussions with certain Aboriginal elders, and we may have, very shortly, we may have some Indigenous representatives for Rise Up Australia. We already do have but I'll let you know as we go along with that, because we're in current discussions at the moment to have some real deal Indigenous representation in our political party, so that we can actually make a difference in Australia. Big vision. You can see it on the website shortly. I'll let everyone know about that. But, we're all for the Bradford irrigation scheme, which Bob Catt has spoken about, and Fraser Anning as well, and many other the independents. We know that's a feasible objective. And what we really want to do, apart from getting rid of the whole two-party system almost, we really want to turn Australia around economically. Now, we can do that very easily. And we detail those, how we go about doing that in our website that's about to come out. So, okay, I'll finish off now. That's just a little bit of a sample of what's going on. Have a safe Christmas. As I've said on my Facebook, it's sort of a little bit disconcerting. Yesterday or today, I think it's yesterday, the federal police grabbed another 3 would-be jihadists in Melbourne. For goodness sake. When is the political establishment just going to wake up and just say, listen, hang on, let's come down hard on all this. Anyone who's even got any connections to terrorism or anything like that, they're out, right? Send them back to where they came from. We don't need those characters here. And if there's genuine refugees that accept the Constitution of Australia and the rule of law of Australia, not Sharia law, you want that? Go back to Saudi Arabia, wherever you come from. But in Australia, we adhere to the Constitution of Australia and the law of the land. And if you don't want to do that, I think there's a few Anzac spirits yelling out right now to sort all this out. So next year, that's what we'll be doing. But for those people who are in Australia and who are genuine immigrants into Australia, like you've got Chinese, Italians, Greeks, Vietnamese. Look, all those people have contributed to Australia, but what we don't need people who are trying to white ant and undermine the law of this land and try and destroy Australia. We've got enough trouble with the last successive governments destroying Australia with globalization. So what I see in finalising this, is this. We've got to put the brakes on big time and hit the whole machine into reverse. And we've got to make Australia great again. And we can do it with the independent politicians and independent parties such as Rise Up Australia Party and Daniel Nyala. And he's been a leader, like a firebrand leader in that area. So I'm looking forward to more broadcasts. But so stay safe. And have a great Christmas, but have a safe one. And just be a bit careful, be a bit aware, because, we've got all this other business going on in the background, which is not the Australia that I grew up in. So we want to turn all that around. And just like Donald Trump just about turned around the economy of the US in 2 years, we can do the same in Australia as long as we get the right people in control. And, Scott Morrison's off to a good start, but the last thing we want is Billy Shorten and the Greens. Oh, my goodness sake, you may as well, that's just like a nightmare. Freddy Krueger, I call it. So, okay, Graham Healy over and out. Have a good day, and we'll speak to you soon. I'll give you more details on the site I've done up for Rise Up Australia. But at this point, you can go straight onto Rise Up Australia's site, but I'll have one that interconnects to that site as well. Okay, have a great day. Graham Healy over and out.